Hello YouTube, this is BirdoPrey5 again, and I'm back. We're going to do a quick review, and by quick I mean, obviously I'm not doing this live, so there's no comments to slow me down. We will do a live stream in the not too distant future, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, where I will go ahead and talk more in depth about both Discovery Episode 2 and the Orville latest episode, and we can do what we normally do. But I wanted to get this out here quick, relatively, before I watched all the other reactions from like the 15, no, literally 5 or 6 YouTube channels I've subscribed to, everyone who's put out a Star Trek Discovery first reaction already. I've watched maybe 15 or 20 minutes of Anti-Tracker's live stream video from last night before I fell asleep. We maybe got 5 or 10 minutes into the episode, I don't know. But I fell asleep, and then I watched it this morning when I woke up, and I haven't seen anyone else's reviews, so yeah, that's where we are. Also, you might notice that my episode 1 review that we did yesterday, live stream, if you had been there, it is gone. Yeah, CBS found it. They said, no thanks, we don't like this. Blocked from YouTube. So I had to delete the video. Gone. So unfortunately that review will not be back. If you were part of it, you'll always remember it. And if you weren't, you didn't miss much. So don't worry. So yeah, I guess we are just gonna go ahead and, no pun intended, use my head for the graphics for today. This is going to be relatively quick. I'm not going to go try to find screenshots for everything I want to say. It would help if I turn the microphone on, however, without shutting it off. Okay, so this is it. And now, I wanted to put this out here because I wanted to get it off my chest, because I know a lot of you are not going to like what I have to say. And if you're going to unsubscribe or threaten to unsubscribe or moan, do it in the comments, right? At least I get credit for having some comments. Or if you can no longer take what I have to say because you so strongly disagree with me, that's fine too. But yeah, I've got to say it. Last week's episode I described as not hating as much as I hated other episodes. Last week's. Last night's episode, a marked improvement. I will officially say I did not hate it. That is a vast improvement from nearly every other episode of Discovery ever produced. I say nearly because the last short track, Escape Artist, I would put nearly in the did not hate it category. The only real trouble with that short track was that it was supposedly supposed to be Harry Mudd and not just some random criminal. Had it been anybody else but Harry Mudd, it would have been solidly in the did not hate category. This episode, We learn some things. It actually answers some of the complaints I had about last week's episode. We know why Pike didn't come out and tell Michael Burnham that Spock wasn't on the Enterprise. He was trying to avoid the question because basically he knows Spock is in a mental institution, and it was Spock's wishes his family not know that he was there. So whether it was right or wrong for Pike to not tell his family that he was there, he was trying to follow Spock's wishes. So that is kind of why he evaded the question. Of course, we know he evaded the question for plot reasons, but at least they explain it away a bit. So, okay, I got to give him some credit there. Michael Burnham actually says thank you in this episode to somebody, to Pike. Now, it's funny because if you're watching it, it's clear she says that as an alternative to what she was going to originally talk about. She was probably going to say something about seeing the Red Angels, but then changes her mind and thinks better of it, and she has to come up with some reason for going to see Pike. So she's like, I'll just say I came to thank you, which is bullshit. She didn't come to thank him. We know that. So, fine, whatever. But we learn in this episode that Pike is actually a pretty religious person. If not religious, at least he knows about religions. His father was both scientist and theologist, I believe. So there was, he's kind of well-rounded in that respect. And sure enough, even though Michael Burnham is not a religious person, she also seems to know a fair deal about religion. So the crux of this episode is that there's another red burst. It is just so far away from where they are that the only possible way to get there is with the spore drive. And despite last week, Tilly specifically mentioned that they were tearing apart the spore drive to convert it back to a standard engine room. They're able to get the spore drive back up and running in literally, the quote is, less than 20 minutes. So sure, Stamets is all for being used again to jump, despite there being no real compelling reason. It's not like Earth is about to be attacked or something. He's just okay with it all of a sudden. Fine. Plot requires him, so they jump. They come to an amazingly Earth-like planet, and a big surprise, radiation due to rings around the planet. Wouldn't you know it, transporters don't work and shuttles don't work. Because, it would just be too damn easy if they could just beam down or shuttle themselves down to the planet. Oh, also, they detected humans. It's a human colony. How is a human colony 56,000 light years from the Alpha Quadrant? That would take 150 years at warp 5 or whatever Discovery cruises at. So how could possibly humans have gotten there that they don't have no idea in their scans? they're able to determine that there's a church around a village, and the church dates to 200 years old, and Michael Burnham says, oh, that's before warp drive was invented. She means that's before humans invented warp drive, because we know warp drive existed for centuries in Vulcan and other cultures. So we got you, Michael. You were wrong about that, but no one calls you out on it. If you were the science officer last week from the Enterprise and you said, oh, warp drive was only invented less than 200 years ago, the other you would have pointed out, actually, warp drive was invented centuries ago. Only humans first invented it, 200 years ago, whatever. So yeah, she was wrong about that. But nobody calls her out on it. Fine. Pike is relying on Burnham, almost like Burnham is his first officer, as opposed to Saru, and asks Burnham who she thinks, right? Why would Burnham be the best one to ask? I mean, this is exactly the job of the first officer. Asks Burnham to pick a person to go down with them, because there's going to be a third person. It just can't be Pike and Burnham. They need a third person. So Burnham picks another woman who grew up in a Luddite colony. Luddite, I believe I'm pronouncing it right. So she'd be comfortable. She'd understand the lack of technology and be able to blend in, apparently, despite the fact they're all going down carrying phasers and tricorders and a whole bunch of modern tech. So they go down to the church isn't completely abandoned, but there's no life signs. They go into the church, big surprise. The church is literally like the coexist bumper sticker with all the different religious symbols next to each other. It's actually stained glass, 200 plus year old stained glass. It looks a lot like a Christian church, but besides Jesus and the crucifix, you've got the Star of David, you've got Islamic symbols, you've got Buddhist symbols, you've got Judaism, and Wiccan. So Wiccan plus all the other major religions of Earth, all together. No signs of Mormons. Sorry, guys. I guess you did not make it. Don't take it too bad. But you didn't make it to this planet. Oh, the planet is called Terra Elysium or something. So clearly they knew they were from Earth. And when they actually start talking to these people, they find out that they are religious. I'm not going to say nut jobs, but they're deeply religious people. And what happened was that all of their ancestors of all different religious backgrounds had gathered inside apparently a Christian church during Earth's World War III in the 2040s or 2050s. I believe like 2050 or something. 2052 maybe. And nuclear bombs were going off in the distance, and they knew it was only a matter of time before they were nuked. They were certain they were going to die. There were some military people in the church as well who had a helmet cam recording the events of what was going on, in fact. And just when they thought that they were about to die, as they tell it, an angel appeared, a red angel, and it took them away off of Earth and put them somewhere. They did not know where they were, but they put them on a brand new Earth-like planet and saved, I don't know, 200 or so people that were in the church. And then apparently they left. They didn't leave any new commandments. They didn't leave any technology. All they did was pick up a building with a basement and a bunch of people in it and transplant it to another planet. Surprisingly Earth-like, but with radioactive rings so that nobody could beam down, or apparently. It also turns out that while Pike, Burnham, and the third woman, third person, who happens to be a woman, were on the surface, something happens to the outer ring of the planet, and Saru is in charge, and they realize that there's an ecological catastrophe. Something happened to the ring, and if they don't do something, the ring is gonna go crashing into the atmosphere and make the planet so radioactive it would be an extinction level event. Basically everyone would die on the planet, including Pike and Burnham and the other woman, since they have no way to transport them out at the time. Okay, fine. The episode goes on. There is a big debate about whether the Prime Directive, which Discovery likes to call General Order 1, applies. They go down with the feeling that since it is a pre-warp civilization, and even though they do find later that the humans know that Earth existed and that they were taken from Earth, that because they are not aware of warp drive, that General Order 1 is in full effect. They cannot tell these humans about who they truly are, or how they got there, or that Earth exists, or any of that stuff. It's like they're contacting a pre-warp civilization, and they just have to blend in and pretend to be locals. So of course they use the old method. Oh yes, we're not from this village. We're from the north. That's always where they're from in Star Trek. So fine. Michael and Pike have kind of disagreements. In fact, Pike even thanks her at one point for following his orders, even though she was so against them. Yeah, it was literally the first time in her life Michael Burnham followed an order she didn't like. The first time in Star Trek Discovery history, anyway. Right, she didn't like the order from Giorgio. She tried to give her the Vulcan sleeper grip, and she woke up and started the war. Even last week, Pike told her not to try to save him, but she did. She completely broke the orders there, trying to save him from the crash. Nobody cared about that broken order. So many other broken orders over the years. Whatever. Just the funny part of it. We got off ahead. So anyway, they go down. while they're on the surface trying to convince people that they're not aliens, there's really only one guy who turns out that his family was the scientists, and they set up. Oh yeah, they went down because there was this. They were getting an emergency transmission on an antiquated frequency or an antiquated system, which is kind of weird since last week Morse code was perfectly acceptable to use. So one would wonder what they meant by antiquated. I assume they meant like AM radio or something. And didn't make a lot of sense because they literally go down, they find this piece of technology under the church that is broadcasting a distress call. But the distress call, they say that the battery is dead. So despite the battery being dead, somehow they jerry-rigged it to still be running. So how do you jerry-rig something to work without a battery? That is a feat of engineering beyond anything. Because if you could jury-rig something to work without a battery, you've solved all the power problems, even of the Starship, right? Even the Enterprise, even the TOS Enterprise needs batteries. Scotty should have just jury-rigged it to work without the batteries. They would have so much less problems. So yeah, whatever. That didn't make any sense. Eventually, the guy who's a scientist basically uses a stun grenade on them. Literally, like he knows that they're advanced humans. They refuse to admit it, because if they do, that would break General Order 1. Why General Order 1 applies to humans, God knows. We've seen this exact situation multiple times in Trek history. Right? In Voyager, I believe the most recent time. Well, because Enterprise, they didn't technically have General Order 1 yet. So, Voyager was the most recent time. There was an entire planet in a Delta Quadrant of humans who had been picked up, like they were all descendants, apparently, of Amelia Earhart and some other random people picked up in the 1950s or 30s, 1940s, excuse me. 1930s, 1940s. Picked up by aliens and dropped off in the Delta Quadrant. And even though those humans had no warp drive, they were human. So of course the Prime Directive doesn't apply, because they're humans. They are from Earth. If you are from Earth, you do not need warp drive. The Prime Directive does not apply to you. We saw it in TNG. We saw it in TOS. At no time has the Prime Directive ever applied to humans. And if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. Because I'm 99% sure I'm right. This is the first time we've ever seen the Prime Directive apply to humans, and it's because the plot makes it more interesting to apply it. But even then, at the end of the episode, or near the end, Burnham is talking to Pike. Oh, okay. So Pike gets shot on the surface The scientist guy, yeah, stuns them with a grenade because he realizes that they're advanced. Nobody believes him. His family has been working for 200 years to try and make the religious people realize that there's science behind what happened, not religion. And these guys are his way of finally proving what his family has known for 200 years. So out of desperation, he stuns them all with some type of stun grenade that I guess he's had laying around for 200 years, and locks them in the church basement, takes all the technology, and he's going to show it off. He's showing it off to the villagers as proof that they're not from a different village, but they're actually advanced Earth human beings. And I mean, he locks them so shoddily in the basement of the church that they can literally get out with like the lady says she needs a magnet, but it looked more like a clothes hanger or something she uses to open the lock. And just in time, they get over to where he's showing off the technology, and Pike is, "What happened to thou shalt not steal?" And he uses religion, and again doubles down on the fact that they're just travelers, and this guy stole from him, and it's all ridiculous, that it's all, he confirms that it's all religious and God and miracles that caused them to be there. And you can see Burnham is not happy at all about it, but she obeys orders for the first time in her life. And then you hear the unmistakable sound of a charging phaser, and somebody's like, what, look, what? And apparently one of the kids, probably related to Michael Burnham, sure enough picks up a phaser and points it at herself, and is about to pull the trigger and blow herself out, kill herself with a phaser. But no, hold on one second. Anyway, she's about to kill herself with the phaser, so Pike jumps in and takes the shot instead of the kid, saves the kid's life. Pike is mortally wounded. The scientist guy's like, you guys have the technology to save him. Why don't you take him back to your ship or wherever you can save him? And he's thinking, okay, at least this will prove he's not crazy. And Michael Burnham says, we need to get him to the church because the church will save him. So of course, so they all help him over to the church, and then Michael has them all leave so they could do, I guess, a private prayer, I suppose. And the scientist guy is like, no, and he pushes through the door, breaks open the door just in time so they can all see them transporting back up to the ship. Which, by the way, there's a B plot that it was quite lucky that they were able to transport up to the ship, because Tilly needed to find a way to save them. There's the planet's rings were collapsing and would have killed everyone if she didn't find a way to save everyone. Also, the helmsman gets to do a donut around the planet, which to me sounds exactly like hugging the donkey from the Orville. So literally, They bring Hug the Donkey from the Orville into this episode of Discovery. Hold on one second. I just gotta choose something. Well, it is unfortunate. I cannot pause this because the way I'm recording, it would screw everything up. So you just have to give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay. So yeah, this B plot. Oh yeah. Tilly, spoiler alert. By the way, it's been all spoilers, so. Tilly's got an imaginary friend all of a sudden. Tilly hurts herself working with that dark matter asteroid they had in the shuttle bay that weighs as much as a moon. So she goes to sick bay, and all of a sudden someone more annoying than her shows up, and it turns out I knew immediately that this was an imaginary friend. But yeah, she didn't know she was an imaginary friend. Imaginary friend helps her to realize that the way to save everybody on the planet is to use the meteor or the asteroid that's in the cargo bay, because they need a way to suck all the rings away from the planet. The first suggestion is tractor beams, but the engineer says, tractor beams aren't powerful enough to pull that much mass. So eventually Tilly's like, if we pull the dark matter asteroid, it's got enough mass to pull all the pieces of the rings around it, and then we can shoot it off, I guess, into space or something. And the helmsman's like, I'd have to do a circle, and Tilly's like, you have to do a donut in space. And the helmsman gets happy at thinking of it that way. So she's hugging the donkey to send this asteroid around the planet to save everybody. Now, if the tractor beams weren't powerful enough to pull the asteroids, how are they powerful enough to pull an asteroid that's more massive than all the asteroids combined? But I digress. So, it is by miracle chance that they just happen to be in the right position to beam up the landing party when they do. There is no communication between the landing party and Discovery. They just happen to be beamed up at the exact perfect time, seconds after they went into the church, just long enough that everyone in the church sees them disappear into light, and of course they all take it as proof of another miracle happening, except the scientist guy. So at the end of the episode, Burnham is talking to Pike and says it's so unfair that guy, his family has been fighting for 200 years to, make them see reason, and they're there and they could save, they could at least tell him, the truth. And Pike says, oh, we can't, General Order 1, but, I don't know. Burnham somehow convinces him that, you know what, yeah, it's okay to break General Order 1, because at least in the case of this one guy, he already knows who they are. He already knows that they were on a ship and all this other stuff. So fine. So, and for reasons unknown, Pike beams down alone into the, I guess, the church basement when only this guy is there. And it was a touching moment. I mean, it was good to see this guy finally get some answers. But Pike comes down, he comes clean to the guy. He's like, listen, we have an order, we can't, we reveal ourselves to everyone else because they, basically they can't interfere. But he answers all the guy's questions. He's like, so you are from Earth? Yes. And you have spaceships? Yes. And you live amongst the stars? Yes. And Earth wasn't destroyed? No. And this guy, you can see he's touched. He doesn't ask if I thought he would ask if Pike could take him, but he doesn't. And Pike explains that, they have to, the civilization has to grow on their own without their interference. But, because it was so important, this is how Burnham convinces him. At the beginning of the episode, or at least when they first get down there, they mention that the military guy's helmet had captured video of whatever happened, whatever caused them to be moved to that planet. So they were kind of looking for this helmet while they were down there, and they couldn't find it before they themselves were found out. So he still wants that helmet. So he goes down there with a modern battery, and he offers a trade to the guy. He's like, I will trade you this very long-lasting power source for a broken military helmet. The guy completely understands what it is and why they want it. He's very happy to give it to them. He hands them the helmet, and he takes the battery in the other hand at the same time. Pike and him shake hands, and or whatever they do, and Pike beams away, and this guy is so happy. He's looking at his new battery, and they had also talked about in the plot that, like, they knew what electricity was because they knew they had lights in the church, but after the church was moved, because remember, this was the year 2050 something when World War III happens. So they had power at one time, but they knew once they were moved to this other planet, all their batteries and stuff died eventually. So they lost all power. So they haven't had any light since, because nobody decided to. They figured, I guess, they didn't need electricity. I don't know. This guy immediately, apparently, knows how to hook the battery right into the wires. And I assume that the wires, the battery outputs 120 volts at 60 hertz. like U.S. standard would have been at the time, because all of a sudden he plugs it in, and instantly all the lights turn on in the church, and the episode more or less ends. And you know what? I didn't hate it. I kind of liked it. The only caveat is you have to be mentally able to forgive, or perhaps even completely forget, all previous Star Trek Discovery before this episode. Season 1 must be wiped from existence. Even most of the events of episode 1 of season 2 need to be forgotten. If you can do that, and if you can look at season 2, episode 2, as the first episode of Star Trek Discovery, it is an enjoyable episode. And if you can't, it's just not as terrible as previous episodes. Jonathan Frakes directed it. Obviously, Commander Riker from TNG. So, he did a good job. The writers didn't suck as much as they usually do. And I know people are gonna hate me for it. I know. I'm sure that an anti-Trekker, from what I saw, was not liking it. I'm sure Doomcock hated it. I don't love it. I'm not saying I love it by any means. I'm not going to say it's a great episode. But, last week I said that they stopped hitting us with a hammer, so we kind of feel some relief at just not being repeatedly hit with a hammer. And like this week, they put a little Neosporin on the wound with the pain relief. So yes, we still have a bloody, gushy wound, but instead of the wound being reopened from new hammering, they actually gave us a small bandage. Yeah, it feels better. It feels better. There's no other way to say it. And honestly, I gotta give this review the highest score I've given a Discovery review. I'm gonna give it a 6.5 out of 10, or a 65 out of 100. Barely passable, but passable episode. Yeah, so I'm prepared for all the hate comments. Go ahead. Maybe I deserve them. We'll see. Qapla. And talk to you guys soon. Live stream, Oh, wait.
Thank you all for watching my video.
Please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that bell icon. Without it, you won't get notifications of new videos. If you want to visit me, check out my forum at juot.net. I'm also on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Gab. And if you're really crazy, you can send me some money on PayPal. Take care.